Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I'd like to welcome myself back because I've been missing for a minute, I think, here. Everyone getting into draft mode and everything like that. But, you know, I'm here with my usual partner in crime, my brother from another mother, my step-brother from another mother. That would be the Dale Doe back to my Brennan Huff, A1, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's up, Brian?
Which one of those two guys is Will Ferrell?
I would be the Brennan Huff of that group. So he's Brennan and Dale is John C. Reilly.
So I'm John C. Reilly?
Yes, sir.
I'm okay with that because Will Ferrell makes me want to claw my eyeballs out.
You know, and I'm okay with that, actually. You know, I've talked about Will Ferrell and, you know, some of these other comedy actors. I mean, almost all of these SNL guys, I mean, it doesn't matter, like Adam Sandler. Like, it seems like it's a hit or miss type thing sometimes with these movies. I heard that the Sherlock Holmes movie, you know, I usually don't let, like, ratings get to me. But I heard so much that was so bad about that movie, the Holmes and Watson, that came out, like, at the end of the year. And I'm just like, I avoided it like the plague. So, and I don't think I'll ever watch it. The only way I'd ever watch it is sometimes movies fall through the cracks. They show up on HBO, and I'm like, okay, HBO usually has a good, you know, track record with any type of movie. That's how I caught John Wick, believe it or not. I missed John Wick in the theaters. I'm like Keanu Reeves, whatever, you know. And then all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is awesome. How did I not go see this like the day it came out? So, you know, a little bit of movie stuff for our folks that came here for football, you know. They just want us to get on with it. But you can't have stepbrothers like me and you with you can't spell bromance without brothers or bro, or you can't spell brothers without bro or bromance, I guess.
And there's the awkward part.
Yes. Well, you make me feel awkward, Brian. want to talk about awkward and talk about, you know, brothers. Speaking of, you know, guys in a locker room are like family. They're like brothers in many different ways, from all different walks of life and whatever, different ages and backgrounds and sizes and everything else. It's just, you know, what else, you know, I guess what I'm getting at is all this stuff that's coming out now over the last few days. You had Josh Harris, who I actually forgot about, who apparently Marquise Pouncey? That's like, yeah. I don't even remember that guy. Was he on the team? Making all these comments, the hit piece, once again, Sports Illustrated with their hit piece. I guess it's because the Steelers, if they're so popular, I guess they can't put a Cowboys hit piece out. Maybe they're just not as popular or will sell as many magazines, the old relic of magazine subscriptions or whatever. They don't do that anymore. They didn't give away football phones or anything like that. I guess they stopped doing that. So now all they do is try and get their hot take in and see if they can get some clicks and get some people to read their rag. And that's pretty much where I'm at with that after the Roethlisberger hit piece that came out a few years ago, you know, the week leading up to that Miami Dolphins playoff game. And then now you got this, and it's like it was literally clickbait to the nth degree of former teammates call out Ben Roethlisberger, or say Ben Roethlisberger is a bad teammate. Ben Roethlisberger is the problem in Pittsburgh. And that's why Pouncey says what he says about Harris here, because it's like former teammates. Now, there's the other one, what we'll get to in a second, but it's like former teammates. And, you know, Pouncey's like, I don't even remember who this guy is because, you know, he had a cup of coffee in the NFL. And we'll talk about Harris's comment in a minute. But the other guy was Red Zone Redman, Ike Redman, who I got to meet down in Jacksonville. He was, he headlined the whole tailgate party when we were doing the deal with GTE down there in Jacksonville, and he seemed like a really stand-up, really cool guy. I doubt he listens to this, but if he does, I hope he hears that, because, you know, I said kind of the same thing to him. He did a little spot with us on going live on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, and, you know, it was above and beyond anything he had to do, but he did it for us. He did it for Steelers fans, and, you know, I'm grateful and appreciative of that. He comes out and he straight up, what did he just mention, or at, you know, the little at sign, he tagged maybe not even just Josh Harris, but he tagged Sports Illustrated, and I think it was Robert Klemko was the author of that specific piece. And he said, you manipulated or twisted my words, as you know, that's not what I said, and I don't have a bad thing at all to say about Ben Roethlisberger. So, Ben's been in the league for, I don't know, like 2 decades. Well, he's been playing in 2 decades, basically. He hasn't been playing for 20 years, obviously, but, he's been around, 14, 15 seasons or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And you found one guy who was, maybe on the practice squad for a couple months and on the active roster because of injury for a few weeks that makes these comments and says Ben's a bad teammate. That's the only guy you can find. Of course, notwithstanding the other guys we'll mention, the two killer bees we'll mention in a little bit.
Yeah, look, I refrained from saying anything about Josh Harris because he's irrelevant. The amount of time that he was able to play, the fact that the things that are in his history, and I don't even want to go down them all, but this is just a bitter guy who saw his chance to get a little recognition and spotlight by throwing Ben under the bus in some way or form. Knowing he could say something that could be neither proven or disproven. It's just ridiculous. So I didn't even want to address it because, what is it? STFU.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's all I got to say about Josh Harris. And I don't know what the deal is with Sports Illustrated. Did the Steelers, steal their lunch money? Did Ben Roethlisberger, fart in their offices or something? I don't get it, man, because they have I'll try and be family friendly here. They have quite the enormous anger towards Ben, and there is really no other way to look at these things. When you look at these interviews, and I know we're going to get to another one before we go on too long, but just the lack of integrity within the interviews themselves, where the questions asked of these folks don't ever get follow up. They don't ever get you're talking softball questions. It's just ridiculous, and it's clear there's a narrative or an agenda that's going along with all this that I don't understand.
I think these guys basically, meaning whoever interviews whoever, cheerleads for that person just because they're accessible. Ben, I don't know that Ben's been accessible in ages, if ever. He makes himself available for his weekly radio show during the season and in a few spots here during the off season where he'll, pop up or whatever, but it's not like he does a whole lot of, autograph signings or anything of that nature, a whole lot of public appearances. I think he's just content with spending as much of his personal time with his family. That stuff might change when he retires, maybe. I don't know, or maybe he'll just go off into the oblivion like a Troy Polamalu, you got other guys who like to continue to be in a spotlight like a Hines Ward or something, and they're not saying anything to that effect. Heck, even Ryan Clark, who has probably made some of the more egregious hot takes about the Steelers organization in the last, few years or so. Even he didn't, completely buy this Ben Roethlisberger thing, which was actually quite a refreshing take from him. I'll see if I could pull that up. But getting back to just Josh Harris for 1 second, I mean, we're really giving him his 15 minutes of fame here, maybe half of that. This guy also, he complained about his college coaches for the reason he didn't get drafted in the NFL draft. He was an undrafted player. I mean, so now you have somebody that comes out years later, and his thing was that Ben intentionally fumbled to prove Todd Haley, the offensive coordinator, wrong? Like, who would do something like that? You know what I mean? It's like, and there's people that actually are buying into this. And it's like, well, then you see that he complained about his college coaches, and that kind of, doesn't that destroy his credibility? Not to mention he wasn't around long enough or whatever. Like, he's the only one who has this take. Wouldn't Pouncey or somebody else that's a veteran player have this take? Even, was it Bruce Gradkowski that came out that said something about this too and was like, no, this is completely wrong. You know what I mean? And Bruce Gronkowski had more, even though he didn't really play in Pittsburgh, because Ben was healthy for a change. He was there for a few seasons. You know, there's so many other eyeballs and people that are around this organization that you have things leak. That to have this one guy that was barely around say this, and it all of a sudden be gospel and open the floodgates of people bad-mouthing Ben Roethlisberger is kind of ridiculous. I mean, we did a show about whether the Killer Bees killed the Steelers, and we went through each one of them, and we also we brought up the possibility of whether or not Ben is responsible for some certain things. But for all intents and purposes, it seems like everyone else comes out and says, you know, this is baloney, and that Ben's a leader.
Yeah, I just look. I think it's fair to say that Ben's style isn't necessarily for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all choose how we're going to play or lead or manage or whatever differently. And, you know, through time, Ben has chosen to surround himself or be close to the people that are critical to him. The offensive line, for example. There's no offensive lineman that's coming out and saying anything negative about Ben Roethlisberger. You've got a lot of receivers who are not saying anything negative about Ben Roethlisberger, except for some that are butthurt. And, you know, I think the bottom line here is maybe Ben doesn't do what everyone wants him to do, but he does what he thinks is right. And that's all any of us ever can do. So, you know, whether we like it or not, I just can't get past the things like Shannon Sharp saying there are no ex-players who say anything good about Ben Roethlisberger's leadership. That's just a blatant lie. There are players who are saying things about Ben Roethlisberger's leadership, and they're saying good things about it. So, you know, it's fabrication, and you wonder, you know, what's the agenda here? And, you know, I can do nothing but give credit to Ben Roethlisberger for staying away from this. Sitting around saying, you know, I'm not going to come out. I'm not going to make any statements. I'm just going to, you know, absorb all this, let time pass, and go forward. Because it's crazy. It's crazy.
I was enjoying a nice wet beverage right there. Try to wet my whistle. Whew, because you know what? I got a lot to say. These guys, I don't even know where to really begin. It's like, you know, it's the same thing with all of these talking heads that come out. They don't have intimate enough knowledge of the teams that they're talking about. They have a cursory knowledge. At least when we get into like previewing and breaking down certain opponents, I think we have more, even though we're basically doing our homework within a week, unless it's someone that, you know, we have familiarity with within the AFC North, or be it like the Patriots or Chiefs or someone that, you know, the Steelers have played multiple times throughout the last few seasons, and knowing all of the different moves and inner workings of that. You've got some of these, you know, national sports, I guess, what do you call them? Analysts? I don't know that you can really call them analysts. They're naming players that aren't even playing on the team anymore in some cases. That was like that Chargers and Patriots playoff game. It's like, you know, you really get paid to do this type of stuff? So they discuss things like Antonio Brown wanting out, and immediately it's just, well, it's because of Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, I guess if it's not Ben Roethlisberger, it's got to be Mike Tomlin. Those are the only two people I could think of other than an individual himself, like Antonio Brown, impacting what happens with Antonio Brown, because Ben throws the ball, right? Unless it's an offensive coordinator. Todd Haley was the problem. Todd Haley's gone now. You don't hear any ill words about Randy Fichtner whatsoever. I guess, you know, he's doing his job and he's well-liked right now. He doesn't ruffle any feathers, but you got some personalities that are going to clash at times. Pouncey, once again. I mean, Pouncey's a leader in the locker room. He's been around for a minute, too. Don't get me wrong. This guy, he's pretty vocal about things. He said the same thing, you know, sometimes he was willing to bring Antonio Brown, but he was willing to have him back. He even said, me and my twin brother, we get in fights all the time. We're family and we make up. And that's kind of the thing where this is really odd because you get these talking heads, like you say. I'm not going to put the words in Shannon Sharp's mouth. I can't remember if it was Shannon Sharp or someone else, like a Stephen A. Smith or whatever. They're basically like, good for Antonio Brown for doing this and doing this. Good for what? Because he stood someone up on a contract. All of a sudden he's not. I've never liked when any of these players have done that. Whether it's like Marshawn Lynch or Cam Chancellor, I think did something like that too, or But in the same aspect, it's funny, it's all Seahawks. Do the Seahawks have drama? I guess they're not on the same type of level of national stage or whatever. They haven't ticked off SI enough to have, some expose about Russell Wilson or Pete Carroll yet. But maybe that's coming in the future. I don't know. But Earl Thomas, he sat out training camp, franchise tag or whatever he was upset about. And then guess what? He shows up for work. Then the guy gets hurt. And remember, Le'Veon Bell made some comment about that. Did that prohibit Earl Thomas from making any money this year, getting signed by the Ravens and making some money for the upcoming season? A 4-year contract worth oodles of money? I have to look it up, but it's not like, this was Le'Veon Bell's thing now, since we're jumping over to him. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? Before I jump over to Bell, what do you think about Antonio Brown and Vontaze Burfict being in the same locker room?
Here's what I think. Since Antonio Brown is all about Antonio Brown, it's going to be fine. He's probably ecstatic because he's not going to get hit in the head playing against him anymore. So
really? Not even in practice?
Nah, they'll never do it. And if he does, he'll yell at the defensive coordinator.
Oh, okay. I see how it is. Yeah, it's somebody else's fault. That's what I'm saying. All of a sudden, he's tweeting how much, let's get it or whatever, black and silver or whatever with Vontaze Burfict and tagging him in a tweet. And it's like, yeah, but Ben Roethlisberger was such a big problem that you had to leave the Steel City. Like, get out of here, man. It's like, it's whatever, whichever way the wind blows. And that's where I'm getting at with Le'Veon Bell here, too, because he's making some of these same type of comments. And there's several interviews that have come out with him in recent days, and he started running his yapper about, well, I was going to come back in week 5, and I was going to come back in week 10, and I was going to come back this time and that time, and I thought about it. And then, what did he say? Something like it would break my heart if I would have gotten hurt, though. And that's what made me think of all this with Earl Thomas, just living up to, even though he still made his stand as a player. And this is the thing with the franchise tag. It's a completely different situation from Antonio Brown, who has a contract that he signed and obligations that are in black and white that he must fulfill. Plus, the Steelers making him basically he's the second highest paid guy on the team. Here you got Le'Veon Bell. And this just bothers me with the Antonio Brown not making enough money or Le'Veon Bell squabbling about contract numbers and stuff after seeing what he's got with the Jets. And we have that breakdown too. But I'm going to talk about Bell first, just from a standpoint of he's now jumped onto the whole let's crap all over Ben Roethlisberger bandwagon, because you know what? It just happens to fit his narrative now, because it hasn't said anything before that. So everybody's saying that Ben's the problem, but do you happen to notice, like, now these guys are gone and they're still running their mouths and they're still making noise, but there's no noise in this really coming out of the Steelers locker room except for, Pouncey saying whatever, that Ben's a leader or sticking up for his guy. You know what I mean? It really seems like, guess what the source of the problems were? Ding, 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 AB and Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell saying that he would return more than once, and then thought back on it, and then thought back on it, and then saying, well, if he would have gotten hurt. That just kind of like cracks me up in more ways than one, because, yes, he did get hurt before, but we're going to break down some of these contract numbers. It's not like he wasn't going to be compensated for playing, and it's not as if the Steelers haven't had a guy who's been seriously hurt and have paid him a solid amount of money in Ryan Shazier, as well as other guys when they have left, or, they have this extra year or so on the contract, or whatever way they structure it, where they still pay out the deal. One of them I think of off the top of my head. I can't get them out of my head because we keep talking about cornerbacks, and we were talking about cornerbacks with the draft just recently. Cortez Allen, 4 years, $32 million. He got all of his money. Even though the guy was, basically shown the bench and shown the door, they still pay out the money. We've always talked about that. But just because it didn't say guaranteed in little itty-bitty fine print with the asterisks below and in italics. It wasn't enough for Le'Veon Bell, but now all of a sudden that means that Ben Roethlisberger is a bad dude too.
Yeah, look, that's exactly the way I'm looking at this article from Bell. I mean, there are things in this article from Bell that I think are outrageous and absurd. One of them is him whining about Ben now because it's simply self-serving. And yeah, as you said, it fits the narrative. He can now chime in. And what's the common thread of the two guys who are chiming in on this? They're gone. That's the common thread. And they're both acting like, spoiled brats about it, to be quite frank. The thing is with Bell, this contention that I intended to show up week 1. Then I just didn't feel like it. And I was going to come in week 7. But they were so mean to me and they didn't make me feel like they respected me. And, it doesn't matter that I told teammates one thing and then didn't do it. And it doesn't matter that I was probably the instigator for those feelings that came back from my teammates as a result, because they didn't just say, oh, you can say whatever you want, Lay, and come on in. I didn't feel the love and the respect, and the team is mean to me, and so I didn't come back. And then this idea, I mean, this is one of the things that boggles my mind. You are a professional athlete, and you have hired an agent whose job it is to know the rule book, whose job it is to understand how financial contracts work in the NFL and what the franchise tags are and what your clients' positives and negatives and benefits are. And you're going to tell me that this moron didn't know that they didn't need an accrued season and he didn't figure it out until week 7 when somebody else reported it? Well, you should be fired, you idiot. You had one job.
It's just, well, and then there's, of course, the tweet. Remember last year when somebody tweeted at Le'Veon Bell, we'll give you $60 million in cash, come to the Jets. And he says, nah, not enough money.
Let's take 100. Let's take $100 million for me to play for the Jets.
Yeah, well, it didn't age quite well considering his current deal. We'll get to that in a second. That one popped up in my head as well. So here's something for you. A couple quotes from Le'Veon Bell in his interviews. They say the Steelers, they don't treat you like you're human. Now. Yeah. Here's a guy. Let's talk about locker room drama. Let's talk about all the things that have been going on. This guy and the other guy, big chest, big checks, and bell checks, whatever you want to call it. Smaller checks, maybe. Rolls Royces. I'm going to sound like a Ric Flair promo in a second, Limousine driving. No. Rolls Royces, helicopters, driving 100 miles down McKnight Road, getting caught with smoking pot down McKnight Road or headed to the airport, or being suspended twice for violating drug policies and getting hurt, and then making some of these comments that they don't treat you like you're human, even though they offered to make you the highest paid running back by far in the NFL, and that still wasn't good enough. There are people that are like saying, hey, he's standing by his principles. This is Tim Benz from Pittsburgh, one of the local media outlets. Unending agenda to heap praise at Bell's feet for standing by his principles. He says, what principles? He stuck his finger in the air to see which way the wind was blowing almost daily. He changed his mind 5 times in the process. That's not nobility, it's being wishy-washy. Paul Zeiss also says, another local media guy, I had a lot of respect for Bell. I've lost it. Don't revise history to save face because you made an idiotic decision and way overestimated your value and didn't get paid like you wanted. Now it wasn't about money. See, it was about Ben, the town bully. Good Lord, God bless. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. They don't treat you like you're human. And we're going to break down the numbers here because there was Pro Football Talk and CBS Sports did a nice job with this, and it's worth repeating. But one other thing was Bell saying, not only if you're not human, he goes, if you're a Steeler, it's supposed to be football 24/7. They don't want you playing video games. And, credit to our own Eric Herman for saying, does Bell actually expect us to believe that Juju is on the team and flourishing while also saying all this? Because, if there's anybody that's out there having fun, and Mark Madden has been very critical of Juju Smith-Schuster and the things that he's done, a lot of it even charitable work, really, Le'Veon Bell, it's all about football 24/7. Maybe it's just because he didn't want to go to training camp and he didn't like St. Vincent College. That's the only connection I can make there. This just sounds like a whole bunch of sour grapes because he can't go and stick his thumb in the eye of the Steelers organization and say, see, I got more money, I got more guarantees, I got more of this and that, because he didn't. And now he's, in all intents and purposes, on a far worse football team.
Yeah, this is all cry me a river nonsense. And I'm sorry, this self-pitying, self-martyring nonsense about I am being penalized, or I was being treated mean, or I. All this nonsense is absolutely absurd. This is an organization that and for to be a credit to the person, the one thing they did say truthfully in the article, or at least we're upfront about, is that the Steelers have never in their history not paid out a contract like Bell's in the second year. So even though supposedly only the first year was guaranteed, he was going to get $33 million in the first 2 years. And at no point in the Steelers' history have they not paid that out. Now, that was written in the article, and I don't know whether an editor made her go back and put it in, because she sure didn't ask him the question and follow up on that and say, hey, Le'Veon, I know you're saying it wasn't guaranteed, but here's the history of this team. And that feels like it was an obvious follow-up that could have been made. But, that's the thing, at the end of this article, or one other article, they really want to berate the Steelers for not adjusting the way they do contracts. Give me a break. They do contracts the way that they do contracts, and they feel that they're fair, and they feel that they are upfront with the players, and they are. It doesn't mean that it's going to be what they want, and that's fine. You don't have to get butthurt about it and cry and say, "Oh, you're mean to me. And you don't treat me with respect because you tried to make me the highest paid running back in the league, but you didn't give me the extra $2 million in guarantees that I'm going to get in 3 years or 2 years when I sign with the Jets. Ooh, I'm so sorry." And we'll go, as you said, you're gonna break this contract down, but it actually is not that great a contract when you really do break it down. And the Jets can say goodbye after a year if he stinks up the joint, and they will be minimally impacted.
And not only that, it's the waffling on, well, I was going to return. Well, who did you say that to? Yourself in a closed room? You didn't say it while you were on a jet ski doing a live video on Instagram or Facebook or wherever it was. He never came out and had any communication with anybody within the organization that was ever anything verified that he was going to come back week 1, week 2, week 3, week 5, week 10, or ever. And now all of a sudden, looking back on it, now that he has his contract, he didn't even know if he was going to be tagged again. Colbert finally came out, about a week, 10 days before, whenever he had that press conference before free agency started, and he's like, "Oh, I'm free." Like, it was this huge burden. He's free. He's free from the That's all he really wanted. For whatever reason, maybe he just doesn't like Pittsburgh. He wants to live in a big city, big lights. Told you, Ric Flair promo. Big lights, big city, fancy cars, New York City, Big Apple. That's the only thing I can think of, man. 4 years, $52.5 million deal after he tweeted out the year before that $60 million cash wasn't enough to get him to come to the Jets. I don't know, man. I'm shrugging my shoulders over here. Steelers had a 5-year, $70 million deal. Now, this is a max incentive over these 4 years. Hold on. I have it here. Let me pull this up. A little over $60 million. So, there's incentives built into this contract. I guess, run for 1,000 yards or whatever be the case might be. Play so many snaps. I don't know. I'm not going that far into it. Just, hearing that here on a podcast would just bore you to death anyways. What we need to break down on here is, here's a guy rapping about resetting the market, wide receiver 2 money. He didn't reset anything, really. And it's comical because the Jets really put his feet to the fire, did they not? When they were like, hey, it was reports all out there like a week or two ago, sign it now. Sign it, this is good for 24 hours or it's off the table. And then all of a sudden he's a New York Jet. I think that's kind of funny. You look at some of the breakdown. Okay, so if he would have played last year, Suppose the Steelers deal was 5 years, $70 million, right? Franchise tag was $14.5 million. So if he would have just played under the franchise tag, $14.5 million. If he would have signed the contract with the Steelers, $20.5 million last year paid because of bonuses and the actual base salary and everything else, roster bonuses, all these other things that are built into the contract. $20.5 million, $14.5 million. Brian, I know math may not be your strongest subject. I'm not sure, but do you know how much money Le'Veon Bell actually made in 2018?
I think it's zero.
Yes, sir. Ding, ding, ding. Absolutely zero. $20.5 million. That's Antonio Brown money. You know? You're talking about wide receiver money. You're talking about some of these guys that are making an average, Odell Beckham, it averages out to $18 million. AB, his is like $16-something million now. Mike Evans, 16. DeAndre Hopkins over 16, Brandon Cooks over 16, Sammy Watkins over 16. You got Jarvis Landry at 15, AJ Green at 15, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Julio Jones, Allen Robinson, all 14 or north of 14. You got T.Y. Hilton and Alshon Jeffrey at 13, Doug Baldwin, Keenan Allen, Terrell Williams just signed with the Raiders, Emmanuel Sanders, Larry Fitzgerald all at $11 million, Tyler Lockett just short of that, Devin Funches with the Colts at 10. Even Jamison Crowder, $9.5 million, and Golden Tate coming in here, bringing up the rear. Golden Tate, Quincy Enunwa, and Deshaun Jackson, and let me see, Adam Humphries, John Brown, all averaging $9 million there. So the reason I'm bringing all those up is because you don't want to pay that. No, don't want that lowly running back money. And the Steelers were offering you, what did we break that down to? It was about $16 million a year initially, and he would have had that $20 million up front. And until Todd Gurley signed that new contract where he's at about 14 or so, David Johnson signed one last year, I believe, as well. You had Devontae Freeman at $8.2 million and LaShawn McCoy at $8 million. That was it. And that's where the market was. So the reason I rattled off all those wide receivers is because his big sticking point was he wanted paid that wide receiver money. Le'Veon Bell's new deal averages out to about $13 million a year, not 16 and not 14.5 that was on the tag last year. And just talking about the wide receivers, how many are getting paid 14 or better? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. A dozen wide receivers. Sammy Watkins is making more money than, way to go, Jagoff. But this is all Ben the Bully's fault. And you go into the 2019 numbers for this contract, and this is CBS Sports once again. Money he would have earned through 2 years of that Steelers contract, $33 million. Money that he's getting this year with the Jets, $14.5, which is exactly the franchise tag that he sat off on. And there is a caveat here, though. If there is a little bit of impact, it's at least 2 years under this Jets contract, and then they could get out from under it. So they would pay out $25 million if they cut him after 2019. But that's still, he's still short. That's $33 million to $25 if he were cut, or $33 to $14.5, almost $19 million roughly less. He would have made over double if he would have just did the deal. I don't get it, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, you talked about the incentives. Just so everybody knows, some of those incentives are things like being the league MVP, being the offensive player of the year, things that are probably not going to happen.
Well, unless he's a quarterback all of a sudden, no.
Yeah.
Only quarterbacks usually get the MVP. Who's the last running back? Peterson, like ages ago, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just not going to happen. And I would like to see follow-ups at the end of this season when the Jets don't make the playoffs, when Bell is not in the top tier of rushing statistics, doesn't have over 2,000 all-purpose scrimmage yards, because that's not the game the Jets play. Then let's see the follow-up. With a team that is in rebuilding mode. Maybe they can at least knock off the Patriots one time and give me some solace, and I'll feel like if that's the case, that maybe it was worth him going there.
Well, here's some more numbers. So, as it continues to get a little better, we go into 2020, and through 3 years of playing now for the Steelers, article quotes, the only rolling guarantees only went through the first 3 years of the contract. Means if the Steelers dumped Bell after the 2020 season, he would walk away with $45 million for 3 seasons of work and being a free agent before turning age 30. So for 3 years, that's playing in 2018 through 2019 and 2020 with that Steelers contract, $45 million. His money to be made with 2 years with the Jets, that means sitting for 2018, missing out on $14.5 million. And now also, he's going to make $26 million for 2 years with the Jets, and then they could be out from under that contract completely. $45 million versus $26 million, man. That's just, it's still in the same ballpark of that $19 million that he's missing out on. I like it. It blows my mind that he was basically offered what he wanted and didn't take it. And this is the best deal he could get, was with the New York Jets, because once again we talked about risk of taking on players. What kind of risks are there with Antonio Brown? He says he's not going to show up with the Buffalo Bills. Le'Veon Bell hasn't played football for a year. Everyone's talking about whether or not he's overweight or in shape. I don't know. He could be. Maybe he's not. Maybe he suckered these guys. You got to think that there's some type of physical or something that's coming up. There's some clause. There's got to be something, right? They wouldn't just pay him out, just anything. And so he hasn't played for a year. He's a year older. Not good for a running back, not for people at his position. He's been suspended a couple of times. The next time he may get tagged for the full year. And he's been injured a few times, seriously injured to his knees. Also not good. Also not good for a guy that's headed into his age. So there's an injury history. There's a suspension history. And he's older. This is the best he could do with the New York Jets. And I just, they're our teammates. I was just joking about this, but, you got some guys here, Jamison Crowder. He's making more money than Jamison Crowder and Quincy Enunwa, but those guys are making $9.5 and $9 million, and they're not even wide receiver ones. That's the best he could do, and it just blows my mind. So he's missed out on $19 million, and so he missed out on significantly more than even the $14.5 million. And, we're throwing this around like it's monopoly money, saying these terms, but I think some people are sitting there like, what can I do with just $1 million? Or even just the difference between $19 million and $14.5 million, that $4.5 million. Or 5.5, or whatever my math is. Yeah, 4.5. $4.5 million. And it's like, $4.5 million can buy you a couple of nice things. I think it got the Steelers, Dante Moncrief. I think that's about where his base is for this year. 2 years, $9 million. So it's just, I don't know, man. I'm almost speechless on this, and it's kind of good that we see we're moving on from some of this drama. We see that it was never really about, it's never really about Ben Roethlisberger, and that was always about the money, or we think it was. I don't know if it's principle. I don't know what it is, but both of these guys, Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, they're out of the locker room now. The Facebook Live stuff, the suspensions, all of that, pretty much tied and attributed to two players. All the contract talks, all the holdout type stuff, all the I want to be traded attributed to two guys. So I really do believe that this is it. You know what I mean? This is the problem. It's not Ben Roethlisberger. And to just quote, to kind of close this up with a quote from Marquise Pouncey, he says, "I've been with Ben going on 10 years. I swear on my kids he's a true leader. Sucks to see players who leave and are mad at the organization now try and point fingers like they're perfect. But this is the world we live in now." Let me repeat that. I swear on my kids he is a true, in caps, leader. He swears on his kids, Brian.
On his kids. On his kids.
On his kids. Wow, it just goes to show you, it's what is that, like thick as thieves is that kind of cliche. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know if you got anything else to say on this. It's I pretty much spit it all out, and I'm thinking this is probably the last time we mention either of these two names, unless it's to just kind of make fun of them, or you some type of news and say, haha, we told you so, or they end up playing against each other, and then they come up at that time.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about Lev Bell when the Steelers play the Jets sometime this year, because I think they have the Jets on the schedule. We won't have to talk about AB, but yeah, I feel like this was cleansing, and maybe it's cleansing for all of us. Let all the whining and the self pitying nonsense go on from these guys, and we can all take it and go, wow, okay, I feel better that they're gone, because it's ridiculous. So yeah, I'm ready. I've been ready to get rid of this and have this nonsense be over with, and now I think it finally might be.
I think so too, and I look at some of the moves the Steelers have made. We really didn't get to talk too much about Donte Moncrief. Just real quickly, since we talked about the free agent stuff before, we talked about Steven Nelson being added. I think Steven Nelson is definitely going to be a solid cornerback 2. I think he could even be a 1B to a Joe Hayden's 1A. I think he has that much upside. I think Moncrief, he could be anything. He could be Justin Hunter and Darius Hayward-Bay and not be on the field. Jericho Cotchery, when he came to town, I think that's where I was basically placing this right now. It took Cotchery until his third season to actually make a huge impact. And yes, I know it wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver, but it's one of those things where this guy can probably catch 40, 50 balls if needed, 600-700 yards, and maybe about 4 or 5 touchdowns. That's quite a bit of production. You replace some of that production, and I'm saying this, of course, if I kind of have him as a slash with maybe a James Washington, because you've got 2 shifty slot receivers, and we know Juju's definitely the one. So I like the signing, and I think he came at a very fair price as well.
Yeah, Moncrief's faster than Cotchery was, so I think he's got more upside than that. And I like the signing. Zach and I talked a little bit about it on the draft podcast. I even like the Mark Barron signing. I think that they've done a better job than anybody's going to give them credit for in free agency with the capital that they had to spend. And yet you still will have people coming up with more moronic ideas, like they need to cut Joe Hayden to get cap space.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, cornerback. Remember, we had the show about what was the number one offseason priority, and we were banging our drum on wide receiver and cornerback, were we not? And
yes,
so let's get rid of the guy that was our best corner, so we can weaken the position again. Because we still, we don't know. Steven Nelson could still be a bust. I mean, in all fairness, this could go either way. I think he has enough upside, and there's enough data there and enough tape to see that he's going to be better than what the Steelers have had, significantly better as the second option. A lot of people are like tossing the coin on Mark Barron, and I was the one here several weeks ago talking about this is a guy I'd like to see the Steelers sign. And what was I doing? Was I like cleaning out my car? I was doing something like outside. That was Sunday, wasn't it? And
yeah.
And I get the alert on my phone. It's probably about like 5 o'clock or something like that. I about jumped out of my shoes with glee. The Steelers don't do anything in free agency. Well, they have added 3 very solid guys that could step in and play. This affords them draft flexibility in being able to do however they want. We got to assume that they're going to try and go after one of the 2 Devons. And guess what? Somehow they got rid of both locker room cancers and wound up with 10 draft picks in this draft. Hello, what else can you possibly ask for from Kevin Colbert?
Yeah, I just don't. If you're complaining this season about free agency, then you're living under unrealistic expectations. Because if your expectations, I did see one person who thought, if we hadn't signed any of these guys and we added this number to this number to this number, we could have got this guy. But again, why? Who? You don't want Earl Thomas. You don't need Earl Thomas. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. And they couldn't have added all those up and gotten one of the linebackers because they cost too much. So, they did a what I believe is a very solid job. And while we won't know for sure until it plays out, I think people are going to fall in love with Steven Nelson. I think they're going to be surprised. I think they're going to be real happy with Mark Barron. And I think we're going to be happy with Dante Moncrief. We will see. I think that we did that the Steelers organization did a decent job with the capital they had to spend.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I know you're not the big Step Brothers guy, but yep, exactly. And I think we're just going to leave it at there. Pretty long-winded already on all of this different Steelers drama. I think we're definitely over the hump now. You're going to get a couple dumb stories that come out there, and even Jesse James coming out and saying that there was whatever. You know what it was all boiled down to? Jesse caught the freaking football. That was all the drama around you, Jesse James. So
that's it.
Hey, you know what? And happy trails to him. It seems like we're like bitter, like, ex-girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever when a player leaves the team. It depends on how they leave the team. And Jesse James was a guy, LJ Fort, I'm going to put in the same category and say I hope they have very good careers because they're handling their business. They're not holding people hostage and they're communicating and they're doing things that are within the confines of this business. They're being business people instead of a bunch of spoiled brats is the best way I could say it. So, Brian, thanks once again for joining me today.
Always great to join you. I want to just give a shout out about our upcoming. We haven't got all the details worked out yet, but our upcoming March of Dimes contest that we've been doing every year, where we give away something if you make a donation to the March of Dimes for their walk for babies. And Emily's story has been up on our site for a while. Go read it. But this year, the real 26. It feels even more appropriate this year. We're giving away a full-size replica helmet from the real 26, Rod Woodson. So we'll have more details on that in the next week or so. But look for it. All you really have to do is make a donation to the March of Dimes in a specific area and comment Steel City Underground, and you're in. And you get a shot to win this helmet. So look at all the people who were helmet worthy. Look at the folks who've won in previous years. Trust me, this stuff gets given away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good thing that Brian does here for a very good cause. So be sure to check that out. We'll have some more details, even more details on that upcoming. And once again, you know what? Rod Woodson's one of those guys. He's one of those guys that's had the contract squabbles and things like that and handled his business and still beloved in the Steel City. So at least by me, one of my all-time favorites. So until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Brian. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.